Casualty, Super Q,
los Miami Dolphins y tú, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Son los Dolphins, nuestros Miami Dolphins, el team número 1 en toda la nación. Y son ellos orgullo de Miami y de todos los latinos en la capital del sol. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Este año no me hablen de los Redskins, no me hablen de los Chargers, ni de los Dallas Cowboys, porque los Dolphins son número 1 y lo demostrarán al llegar al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Nuestra línea está mejor que nunca y nuestra defensiva fue siempre la mejor. Y es por eso que yo no tengo duda que los Miami Dolphins ganarán el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl.
Universal Casualty
Y Super Q, los primeros. Bueno, caballero, todo el mundo que cante con nosotros. Dame una D, dame una O, dame una L, dame una P, una H, una I, una N, una S. ¿Qué es lo que tenemos? Miami Dolphins. Me voy para el Super Bowl. 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 Me voy para el Super Bowl.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
There's a team that's in our hearts. We've got love that won't depart. We
Hello, Miami Dolphin fans, and welcome to the Same Old Dolphin Show, part of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. I'm Josh Katzker. With me today and every day is my brother from the exact same mother, Aaron the Brain. Aaron, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
Brain, we have a deal.
Finally, we have a deal. Tua Tagovailoa. How about this? 4 years, $212.4 million extension. Good for an annual average value of $53.1 million, making him, that puts him at the time, it put him at the third highest average value in the NFL. But we have hear me. My mic got unplugged there. I got a little excited. we have breaking news and a broken microphone. That's great.
Breaking news and a broken microphone. It's unbelievable.
You sound like crap, by the way.
Hold on. We're gonna fix this here because everything has gone haywire here on my audio. So let me fix it.
Tua gets paid and just everything goes.
Tua gets paid and everything goes off the rails. So Tua gets paid 4 years, $212.4 million, annual average value $53.1 million, which is 0.1 annually more than Jared Goff. I love that move. That's hilarious. But then, just now, right as we're about to go live, we find out that Jordan Love, the other quarterback represented by Athletes First, has also signed a new extension for 4 years, $220 million, which puts him on par with Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence on that $55 million annual value. So, Brain, listen, this is not, far be it for anybody to come on to this show and tell us that the Same Old Dolphin Show is a pro Chris Greer podcast. But I think at this moment, you got to tip your cap to Chris Greer because he done invested some good money and got Tua Tagovailoa at a value contract, all things considered.
Yeah, I think obviously when the Jared Goff contract was signed, I think it cost them some money. And then when the Trevor Lawrence contract was signed, I think that not only cost them money, I think that really, slowed down the negotiation, because I think that was kind of, and you're not going to know this unless you're really in the know, but my gut tells me that when Trevor Lawrence got paid, Athletes First probably said, well, hey, look, the Tua is out there saying the market is the market is the market. And you could legitimately just look at it and say, look, empirical data will show that Tua has been better than Trevor Lawrence. And so if Trevor Lawrence is getting $55 million a year, then Tua needs to get at least $55 million a year. And I think Chris Greer said, well, hold up. Just because the Jacksonville Jaguars decide to pay Trevor Lawrence $55 million a year does not mean that Trevor Lawrence is worth $55 million a year. And so I think that's kind of where the negotiations probably stalled. And that's probably why this took a little bit of time. I also think that to some extent, it's very possible that the Dolphins were below the Jared Goff number when this thing started. I don't think it's a coincidence that it took Tua not practicing for 1 day for this to magically get done. My instinct tells me that Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel probably in this poker game that was going on probably said, we think that Tua cares too much about football and about his teammates and about his image. We don't think he's going to come in and not practice. And the fact that he did that, likely at the advice of his agent, which is great advice. I think the Dolphins probably said, you know what? If he's not going to practice, this year is too important to us. This training camp is too important to us. However far apart we're at, we need to figure this thing out. And the deal magically got done 24 hours later, essentially. So ultimately, Chris Grier should be lauded for not having an egregious overpay here. I think when you compare Tua to Jared Goff and you look at the two contracts and you look at the two players and you say, and look, we don't know exactly what the terms of this contract are. We don't know if the $167 million is fully guaranteed, if there's any, roster bonuses or anything like that are, could change that number. We don't know exactly how much is fully guaranteed at signing, but the contracts between Jared Goff and Tua Tagovailoa are very similar. Tua's got a slightly higher annual average salary, and Jared Goff's got $3 million more of guaranteed money. So you're looking at two comparable players. They got two comparable deals, and the Trevor Lawrence deal is kind of the outlier. I think Jordan Love ultimately getting $55 million a year. And granted, a lot of people will say, well, there's fewer doubts around Jordan Love. Doesn't have an injury history, has maybe more superior physical tools and physical ability. And you could say, well, he's won a playoff game as well. And he did it with, a far lesser cast around him on offense than Tua had. And so I think that's the argument for why Jordan Love would get paid more than Tua, even though Tua at this point has a far greater and more extensive track record than Jordan Love, who essentially had 10 really good games at the end of last season.
It was 8. I think he played 8 games last season.
8 games last season. So you can make the case that Tua should be getting paid more than Jordan Love. At the end of the day, it's what the team is offering you. And I think Chris Grier clearly played hardball in this situation. And I think he got Tua closer to his number than to Tua's number. And I think we got the concession to come down to 4 years instead of going the full 5 years on it. And I think when the terms of this contract come out, the flexibility, we'll get to see exactly. I mean, it sounds like you could pretty much guarantee that he's going to be here through 25, 26, and 27, because it sounds like the first 3 years of that extension are going to be mostly guaranteed. But it is possible that one of those years is sort of like a roster bonus where the Dolphins could potentially get out of it after 2 years. We don't really know that. But either way, it's a team-friendly deal. It's a fair deal. It's not like Tua took a below market value deal. He got the market value deal that he wanted, but the Dolphins didn't, go crazy and make him the highest paid quarterback in the league. And I think the best thing you could hope for as a Dolphin fan was that this gets done quickly so that it's not dragging out very far into camp and affecting this team preparing for the regular season. And that also it's fair for both sides. Now it's done. And supposedly Tua had the best practice anybody's ever seen him have. So that's certainly great to hear that, with the weight off of his shoulders, getting this done, all of a sudden, everything is clicking. It's training camp, not going to overreact to any of that, but now we can focus on football. There's a couple other contracts that need to get done, but the pressing one, the one that mattered, the one that needed to get done is done. Tua is a Miami Dolphin for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's a pretty great situation. Although not everybody's happy. I see some folks in the chat. And by the way, shout out to everybody watching live on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel and the I Am a Miami Dolphin Fan Facebook page. Shout out to everybody. Go ahead and take a moment if you would and go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you're notified every time we go live. So not everybody is happy, but a lot of people are. And I think even if you're somebody who was skeptical about paying the quarterback, again, as I've said so many times, there's not really a whole lot of alternatives out there that are fitting better. And what I think happened here is that the Dolphins were able to get a contract or get a deal done with Tua that worked out for both of them. I think everybody was probably a little bit unhappy with something, and probably everybody is certainly happy enough about something that the deal got done. So that works out. So a couple of little facts, because we're still waiting for the details about the contract. But what we do know, the contract is the largest ever in Miami Dolphins history. Tua is now, at the time of the contract being signed, Tua became the third highest paid quarterback in terms of per year basis. He's now fourth because Jordan Love has come over the top with his deal from the Packers. But how about this stat, Brain? Are you ready? Do you know what Dan Marino's career earnings in the NFL was? I mean, it's not apples to apples, but do you know what Dan Marino's career earnings were?
I don't know, $53 million.
$51 million. Tua is going to make more money this year. Well, sorry, in 2025. He'll make more money in 2025 than Dan Marino made in his entire career.
Well, that's true for 2025 because that's where I don't know. His signing, he probably made more on his signing bonus.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we
don't
know how it breaks down.
He probably made more today than Dan Marino made in his
on
entire
an annual
career.
basis. Tua's making more money than Dan Marino made in his entire career, which is pretty outstanding. So listen, I'm very curious for those of you that are in the chat and are not happy with this signing. I want to know why you're unhappy about it. And I see a lot of people saying, well, you got a guy who can't beat good teams, And that's true. I mean, at least we haven't really seen it. We haven't seen him win a playoff game yet. We haven't seen him really perform well in cold weather on the road. But you know, the fact of the matter is, Tua's the guy now. And all of that other talk is now irrelevant. There has been a lot of divisive conversation surrounding Tua Tagovailoa since he was drafted by the Dolphins, and people not thinking he was the right guy and waiting for the opportunity for the Dolphins to move off of him. Well, now it's locked up. Now it's signed, sealed, and delivered. Nobody's coming to your rescue if you're an anti-Tua guy. I don't know what to tell you. At this point, all you can do is put your head down and cheer for the Miami Dolphins to do the best that they can possibly do, because this guy's your quarterback for 24. He's your quarterback for 25. He's your quarterback for 26. And he's probably your quarterback for 2027 as well. And then we'll see beyond that, barring injury, of course. And so it is what it is. And again, I laud Chris Grier for getting this job done. Brain, we've got a couple questions here in the chat, and I want to share one. We'll say from David Dupree on X or Twitter.com. He says, who's next, Reek or Holland? And I think the answer to this one, Brain, and you can tell me if you agree, but I think the answer here is clearly Tyreek Hill. For me, I'm not so sure Javon Holland is getting a deal, because Javon Holland plays safety, and that is not a position where Chris Grier likes to spend a lot of money. But I think it's highly likely the next thing that's going to happen is Tyreek gets some kind of rework, maybe gets an extra year tagged on to the end of his deal, and that puts the Dolphins in position to sort of make a push here over the next 2-3 years.
I think there might be a Band-Aid coming with Tyreek Hill, where they move some money into this year, because they certainly have the cap space, and we don't know what the cap implications are necessarily, if the Dolphins are going to roll the signing bonus into this year's cap and lower Tua's 2024 cap, or they're going to keep his 2024 cap as it is and basically give him a very small cap number in 2025. Either way, they've got the space now with this out of the way, and the available space that they have, where they can put a few $1 million. They can move a few $1 million around in Tyreek's contract into this year. And then I think what they'll say to Tyreek is, look, we don't want to just put 2 years at the end of your contract right now. You got 3 years left on this deal. You got 2024, 2025, 2026. But if you can go out there and have another great season in 2024 and keep your nose clean and we don't have any incidents off the field, then maybe we can revisit this in 2025 and give you a little bit of an extension or really rework the contract. I don't think you're going to see some huge change in Tyreek's contract. And I think the fact that Tyreek has been pretty mum about this since first bringing it up, over a month ago now, I think kind of shows you kind of where the team is at, where this is not necessarily a priority for the team to get this done. And Tyreek himself saying, look, I told Drew Rosenhaus, look, I want to get this thing done. I want to get some sort of reworked contract, but I don't want to get traded. I want to be here. And so, you know, if Tyreek was really unhappy and really wanted to play his cards, he could have held in or held out and really made this a circus. The fact that he's come in and has been at practice and has been saying all of the right things, I think bodes well, not just for the team, but also I think for him getting something done, but I think it could be something in the way of like a Band-Aid. Just give him a few $1 million this year that you move up from like that last year in his deal that he's never going to see because it's not guaranteed. And just put it into this year. And then if he plays great and he stays clean, then this is something that can be revisited at the end of the year. As far as Holland, it's a tricky situation with Holland because if you're looking at it right now and you're saying, we want Javon Holland to be an identity piece on our defense for the next few years, and you don't sign him this year, and you don't sign him prior to this season, and he goes out and he balls out, well, then he's going to get a top-of-the-market safety deal, which is going to be in the neighborhood of what not McKinney. He's going to want more than McKinney if he goes out and has a great year. But the guy who just got paid, Antoine Winfield Jr., he's going to want somewhere in the neighborhood of that if he goes out and has a great year. And the one thing that Miami has in their back pocket, now that Tua is paid, you could franchise Javon Holland next year. And so they've got that kind of as a leverage move as being the one guy now that is in a contract year. So I think they do have that leverage, but if they wanted to get a long-term deal done with Holland, I think they can save themselves a lot of money by getting that done now or prior to the season or very early in the season, as opposed to waiting. Because if you wait, then I think you're either going to have to give them a monster deal or you're going to have to franchise them. And I don't think either of those are great options, but I think they'd probably end up franchising him.
Well, Brain, all that being said about Holland, I want to come back to this comment from 72 Undefeated, who's watching live on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. He says, what happens when he chokes again this year or gets hurt? This is in reference to Tua. He says, we only talk about it if he's better. We'd regret not signing him, but never what if he shits the bed again. And I think that's a fair point. And I think that's something that we've discussed on this show. And in fact, we ended up running out of time on the last episode, so we didn't end up talking about speculating about why this deal hadn't gotten done yet. But I think I even put out something the other day on Blue Sky, where you can follow me at Amplified to Rock on Blue Sky. I put out a post saying that I was kind of torn about the Tua contract situation because I understood why the Dolphins wouldn't want to necessarily put out a lot of money towards him. I understood the argument that He only has stayed healthy for 1 year in his NFL career. He had several years with injuries in a row. And so I understood the idea that if you paid him and you didn't put in protections for yourself and he ended up getting hurt again, you could really find yourself up a creek without a paddle. But the Dolphins evidently found a place to where they felt comfortable enough making that deal, because I think the other side of the coin is, if he does play well, if this last season wasn't an aberration, then you're going to end up having to pay a whole lot more. And I think the other thing was that they didn't want to negotiate against themselves, because I think the situation as it was is if Tua like never played us down a football this year, nobody in the league is going to be sitting there going, this is a $50 million a year player. Right. And I don't know that there were that many other teams in the league that still would necessarily believe that, because I think, rightly or wrongly, Tua is perceived as a product of this Mike McDaniel system. Rightly or wrongly, a lot of the perception is that for all of the success he has had as a quarterback under Mike McDaniel, the reason that he's had that success is because of the supporting players, because of the coach. That is one of the big arguments outside of the organization. I'm not saying that that's true, that I necessarily believe that, but that's what a lot of people do believe. I believe there are fans of the organization that believe that. And again, I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's a fact. That's a perception that is out there. And that as such, the Dolphins weren't negotiating against themselves, because they don't believe that there was another team that was going to be willing to splash out that big cash. And I think that was probably something that was playing into the argument here. So yes, is there a possibility that the Dolphins could end up falling short here because Tua gets hurt again? Yes, absolutely. And if that is something that happens, then I think the Dolphins are very much within their rights to try to renegotiate some parts of this contract in years to come, as much as the details of the contract will allow them to do that.
I mean, you got $167 million guaranteed. Right. I don't know how much you're going to really negotiate. That's the whole point. But I think you could look at it, and I think it's a fair point. Like, yeah, we're all talking about, well, yeah, this is a great deal if Tua stays healthy and he balls out and he continues on the trajectory that he's had. And I would say, well, yeah, that's the trajectory that he's on. There's not really a reason to believe that he's not going to continue on that trajectory, given everything you've seen from this player, the talent around him, the way the offense is being built. Injury is always a possibility. And then you could say, well, all right, what if his ceiling is capped and this is where he is. He's always going to choke at the end of the year. What, blah, 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 blah. All right. Here's the thing. Who else you got? The argument is, if your argument is Tua is only going to play as well as he did this past season, and you say, well, then Tua is going to end up, throwing 29 touchdowns and 14 interceptions and leading the league in passing, and the Dolphins have the number one offense in the league, and but they don't win a playoff game. Would that be disappointing? Obviously, that would be disappointing, but the numbers and the production would still state that he's still a quarterback that's in that market, that's going to get that type of value. And the quarterbacks that you're thinking, are better than that. Well, who are they? And what's your plan?
Exactly.
Because you're not going to go into next season and draft a quarterback thinking that that's going to be better than Tua and that's going to take you to the next step.
And that's the argument that we've been making. We've been making that argument.
And you're going to say, oh, well, I'll take Derek Carr, and you'll get a discarded Derek Carr, and maybe that'll be cheaper. But you got an offense that was tailored and built to the strengths of Tua Tagovailoa, right, which are not the strengths of any other quarterback that are going to be there. You know what this offense can do with Tua and the weapons that are there. And the downfall of this offense last year, while partially Tua is to blame, there were other things at play. There were injuries to receivers. There was subpar play on the offensive line. There was a lack of depth at wide receiver, at weapons. That argument, that's not going to be valid this year. I mean, unless the entire right wide receiving core gets hurt, there are more weapons on this team this year than he had last year and the year before, with the additions of Jonnu Smith and Odell Beckham Jr. and then the draft picks, and then the addition of Jalen Wright in the backfield, which is going to free up Devon Achane to be used more in the passing game. You also went out and got Jody Fortson, who maybe makes the roster as a more athletic tight end. You've got more depth in the receiving core, tight end room, and running back room than you've had before. And so the offensive line is still a major question mark that we're going to probably hammer to death throughout the entire season. But if Tua is the player that he has been the last 2 years and just makes marginal improvements, and Mike McDaniel makes marginal improvements as a coach, I don't see, aside from injury, I don't really see how this deal backfires. Again, we'll know the full terms of it within the next couple of days. But in all likelihood, because the people that are like, oh, I don't want to commit that much money, let's just take it on a year-to-year basis. Well, they're probably not going to want to pay him next year. And they're going to say, they're probably of the opinion that, oh, well, we could just franchise him next year. Well,
here's the thing.
Next year is going to be a $42 million hard cap hit if you franchise Tua. And I guarantee you, without even looking at the numbers, that Tua will not have a cap hit of anywhere near $42 million.
Yes.
Until at least 2026.
Right. And here's the thing, Brent. And a lot of people are making this point in the chat. The fact is that regardless of how you might feel about him, regardless of how I might feel about him, regardless of how our friend 72 undefeated in the chat feels about him, the fact is the Miami Dolphins players, the Miami Dolphins coaching staff, the Miami Dolphins front office wanted Tua Tagovailoa to be their starting quarterback. And that's all there is to say about it. They wanted him, and now they've locked him up. And now, with that said, in the immortal words of Jed Bartlett, what's next? Because now you can put this behind you. Okay? Yes, I understand the concerns. Your quarterback hasn't managed to figure it out, put it together, and beat and win those big games in December. Hasn't done it on the road, right? But your coach hasn't done that either. Your team hasn't done that either. We know that Tua as a quarterback operates at his best when he is on schedule and that ball is coming out of his hands at the right moments and everything is on schedule and they can have that quick strike offense. We know that that's when this offense is at its best. What we also know is that when it comes time to be unscripted and go off script and try to make something happen, that's an area where Tua doesn't quite succeed as much. I won't say he doesn't succeed in that way ever, because he has made to make some of those plays, but it's not an area where he thrives. And so this is an area where if you're the Miami Dolphins, you're the Miami Dolphins front office, you have to continue to build a team where you are minimizing the reliance on something like that, right? And again, yes, does that put some restrictions on how your team has to be built? Sure. But if you know that going in and you're prepared for that, then it is what it is. You're trying to, you know who your quarterback is, you know who your players are, and you're trying to build the best team to complement those players, whoever that is. So now Tua Tagovailoa is the Dolphins quarterback. He's going to be the quarterback for a long time. And now it's time to turn your head and turn your attention to what lies beyond, because we got a long football season ahead of us. And we still got a lot of questions as a Dolphins organization that need to be answered going forward. What are some of those questions? We're going to answer them. And we're going to ask them anyway, but we're going to ask them in just a moment. First, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsor.
The DolphinsTalk.com podcast network is sponsored by Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive, Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship it to you. International fans, too. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com. Caneswear.com.
Thank you very much to our friends at Caneswear.com for sponsoring this episode of the Same Old Dolphins Show. So, Brent, let's ask some questions about this Miami Dolphins team because, now the Tua thing is behind us. So now we can start to look forward and we can ask some of these questions. Remember, Brain, one of the questions that I asked you in our last episode was, how is this Dolphins team set up to win on the edges defensively without Jalen Phillips or Bradley Chubb? And you said at that time, they're not really. And then the next day, Shaq Barrett announced his retirement. And just pouring salt in the wound. I mean, listen, I understand Shaq Barrett has to do what he has to do. His family has been through something that nobody should ever have to go through. And so the fact that he wants to hang it up and spend time with his family, I think is wonderful for him. And it's good to know when your time playing the game is done and to be able to walk away and be healthy and have that time to spend with your family is great. Right. I'm never going to fault somebody for that, but I couldn't help but think to myself when that was announced that this is some of the most same old Dolphins stuff I've ever of course you splash out some money to sign Shaq Barrett. He's still been a productive player. You give him a decent little veteran contract to bring him in, and then he decides to hang it up. It's a pretty same old Dolphins thing. But the Dolphins have since moved on, and they've now signed Emmanuel Ogbah back.
Unfinished business.
Yeah, Emmanuel Ogbah just can't quit the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins can't quit Emmanuel Ogbah. He's back, and so Brain. Apparently, word on the street is from those people who have been at camp these first few days of practice say Jalen Phillips looks very much like the kind of guy who's going to be ready to go in week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that would certainly give this group a lift. But Brain, that's one of the questions that I have is what is this Anthony Weaver defensive unit going to look like for the Miami Dolphins? We've heard some positive reports out of camp from people who have been in the building about Chop Robinson, about Mo Kamara. We've heard some positive reports, and that's good. But again, I will preface this by saying I think a lot of what you get out of these camp reports is noise because they're guys, they're practicing. There's no pads. It's nothing, I think you got to take everything that you hear about these practices with a grain of salt because it's not a truly competitive environment. I think it's great to hear that certain players look explosive. I think players that are coming off of injuries, hearing that they look good and are moving well, that's certainly encouraging to hear. But I think the biggest thing that you want to hear out of camp is nobody's getting hurt. Everybody's healthy and we're moving along. And then you get to these practices against these other teams, whether it's the Atlanta Falcons or whoever it is the Dolphins are going to be having these joint practices with. That's, I think, when you can really start to glean some things, truly. But that's a big question that I have, Brain, is what is this defense going to look like this year? What are some questions that you have about the Miami Dolphins heading into 2024?
Well, yeah, I think that's a fair point to be questioning the defense. It's obviously first year under Anthony Weaver. I think from what has been seen, the little bit that's been said, the roster moves that have been made, I think it's fair to say this is going to be a different defense than what the Dolphins ran last year. There's going to be some elements that are the same, but I think it's going to be more of the Mike McDonald defense of, simulated pressures. There's going to be a lot more blitzing. It's going to be more of a keep you on your toes. A lot of different rotational guys coming in and out. It's going to be different as opposed to the Fangio defense that we saw last year, which was very much like we're playing with the same essentially 14 guys. We're very few substitutions. We're showing you the same thing pre-snap, and then we're mostly, we're changing it up here and there, but it's very vanilla. It's very soft. Keep everything in front of you. And then obviously when players got hurt and you had to then rely on players that weren't really part of the rotation, all of a sudden the defense broke down very fast. Whereas I think this is going to be more of it's a deeper roster, especially on that side of the ball. Really the entire football team, I think, is deeper in just about every room than it was last year. But I also think there's going to be more multiplicity, I think, with the way this.
Oh, multiplicity.
So I think it'll be interesting. There's definitely going to be questions about, the edge rushers, because you're going to be relying so much with Shaq Barrett out. Even if Jalen Phillips is ready for the season, you're going to be relying a lot on two rookies, on Chop Robinson, who the big knock on him coming in is like, does he have the body right this second? Everybody knows the athleticism is there, the first step quickness is there, and that this guy has a high ceiling, but is he ready to be an every down, defensive end or outside linebacker at this point? Or is he more of like a passing down specialist? And then Mo Kamara, look, this is a 5th round pick. Is this guy going to be able to play like 30, 40, 50% of your snaps as an edge rusher? These are big time questions. Aside from that position, I think as long as everybody stays healthy, I think the interior of the defensive line is going to be heavily, heavily reliant on Zach Sealer and Calais Campbell. And then which one of those other guys of all the guys that they brought in on the interior defensive line, which one of those guys pops and becomes a player that you can actually rely on? And then on the other side of the ball, look, it's the elephant in the room for the past 20 years, and that's the offensive line. And I see the vision of this offense. You got the whole offense devised last year, the brilliant idea, hey, we're going to get the ball out in like less than 2.5 seconds, and we're going to be good. And when we did, it worked. When defenses started bracketing Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, or those guys got hurt and they weren't playing at 100%, all of a sudden we weren't able to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds, and it became a problem because if he held onto the ball for more than 2.5 seconds, he had defenders in his face. I don't think that that's necessarily going to change this year, because I don't think that there's been a lot of improvement on the offensive line. Maybe there has. We won't know that until they start playing games. But what I do know is they've got more weapons. And so there's more places to potentially go with the ball within that first 2.5 seconds, so that you don't have to hang on to it because your first read or your second read are being bracketed. If those guys are being bracketed, there's going to be somebody else that's got man coverage that's able to beat man coverage. That's why they brought in Odell Beckham. It's why they brought in Jonnu Smith. My biggest question, though, isn't about the passing game. This team ran the ball very successfully last year, but they did not run it successfully on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. And I maintain that is the Achilles heel of this offense, is when push comes to shove and you cannot rely on the passing game to just move the ball all the way down the field. When you get into those short yardage situations, maybe the weather's bad, maybe you're just playing a really good defense, can you just get a tough yard or two running up the middle? If this team can manage to do that and figure that out this year, and Mike McDaniel can trust them to do it and trust himself to call the play, and this team can do that successfully, the offense is unstoppable.
I love it. It's Chris Brooks season, baby. So lots to talk about, lots to discuss. But I think if you're a Miami Dolphin fan and you're in South Florida, here's what we got. We got a Sunday. You can watch some practice live. And I think there's going to be a lot of people there at the practice cheering on QB1, Tua Tagovailoa, cheering on the Miami Dolphins. I think basically where we're at is we have turned a very important page in the story of this Miami Dolphins 2024 season. I think you could say that this was something of a prologue that could have gone very, very wrong. But instead, the deal is done. We can turn the page, and now we can truly look ahead to this season and have it be about football and things on the field. At least that's what we hope. So that's going to wrap us up for this episode of the Same Old Dolphin Show. We'll be back again next week. I want to drop another hint to remind you that if you are enjoying the Same Old Dolphin Show, you're enjoying the content here at Dolphins Talk, there is going to be an opportunity for you to get a whole lot more content from us, from Mike, and you're just going to have to hang around. We're going to be making an announcement about that very, very soon. So make sure that you're following us. I'm really not on the Twitter machine anymore, but you can follow the show at Same Old Dolphins. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Amplified to Rock. You can follow the Brain at Aaron the Brain. Make sure you're following Dolphins Talk. Make sure you're subscribed to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. Make sure you are liking the I Am a Miami Dolphin Fan Facebook page. Make sure you have subscribed to the Same Old Dolphin Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere you get your podcasts. We appreciate it very much. If you leave us a 5-star review and a 5-star rating and a positive review, we'll appreciate that very much as well. So we hope that you will go out of your way to do that. I hope that you are enjoying the Olympics and the summer. Things are heating up now in the NFL, and we're going to get you covered. We're going to have you covered right here at the Same Old Dolphin Show and the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of La Familia. Take care of yourselves and each other. And as always, go Dolphins!
Tua got paid, and I'm a happy fan today.